I've just returned home from a cruise that was like no other cruise that I've ever taken. I booked this cruise to get a few nights of what I thought was going to be winter sun, but it very quickly turned into something really quite different. In fact, we ended up sailing through a storm, and we had rough seas on every single night of the cruise, which is something that I've never ever experienced before. After I arrived home, I posted this video on social media, and it went viral across multiple of my platforms. I've received so many comments and so many questions, and so I've put this video together to share more with you about what it's like to spend time on a cruise ship crossing rough seas. This cruise was in Europe, and it was in January, so I knew the weather was going to be a bit of a gamble. Sometimes in Europe at that time of year, the weather can be lovely and sunny and calm. But other times it can be stormy, it can be wet, and it can be windy. But after I booked this cruise, I kept everything crossed for sunshine. The ship I chose to cruise on was MSC Splendida, which was a Fantasia-class ship operated by MSC Cruises. The other ships in this class are MSC Fantasia, MSC Divina, and MSC Preziosa, the latter of which I spent time on last year. So I knew that chances are I was probably going to really like the ship. The cruise was a short one. It departed Palermo in Italy on day 1. It was due to then spend day 2 docked in La Golette in Tunisia on day 2, before then spending day 3 at sea, travelling to our final port. On day 4, we'd wake up in Barcelona, and that's where I would disembark the ship to fly home. There were 2 main reasons why I booked this cruise. First, I've wanted to go to Tunisia for quite some time, and to do that by cruise ship seems to me like one of the most logical ways of doing it, because I can then dip my toes in, see if I like it, and if I do, I can go back for a longer period of time. The second reason that I booked this cruise was because, to be honest, this was an absolute bargain. The ship was operating on a 7-night rotational loop, but at the end of this 7-night cruise, it would be going in for a dry dock refurbishment. That's when they take a ship out of action, they remove all the water from around it, they do all the technical upgrades, and they also often upgrade the passenger facilities on board. During the final few nights of the last 7-night cruise before dry dock, the ship must have been operating at a lower capacity or a lower fill level, and that's then made the cruise line advertise this 3-night cruise at a really good price. So I thought, what have I got to lose? Let's book it. I flew to Italy the day before the cruise, and I was absolutely delighted to arrive to temperatures of around 17 degrees Celsius, which is 63 degrees Fahrenheit, which wasn't hot, but remember it was January, and therefore winter. It felt so nice to leave the freezing cold temperatures of the UK behind to just feel the warmth of the sun on my skin right at the start of the new year. When I arrived at my hotel, I was delighted to learn that they'd upgraded my booking from a small single room to a premium balcony room. But little did I know at that point, the weather and my good fortune was going to change the next morning. I woke up at the hotel to find that it was pouring with rain. I've never seen rain this heavy in Italy before, and so I kissed goodbye to my hopes of walking along to the cruise port, and I jumped in a taxi to get there so that I would arrive and still be dry. When I got to the port, it had dried up, which allowed me to get inside before it potentially started raining again. Embarkation was an absolute breeze, and before I knew it, I was in my cabin, which was a premium balcony cabin on deck 9 of the ship. I'll tell you more about this cabin, and I'll also give you my full review of this cruise in another video. On that note, if you've just found me today, then I'm Fraser. I use my YouTube channel to share all of my cruise experiences, my tips, and my advice with you. If you'd like to support my channel, which I would really appreciate you doing, then all you have to do is click the thumbs up button and also subscribe, and come with me on so many more ships. So, let's talk about when this cruise took a turn. Shortly after sailing out of Palermo on the first night, my cabin attendant knocked the door with a letter. The title of the letter was Important: Rough Weather Conditions Ahead. Now, before I explain any more about the letter, I have been warned about rough seas on cruise ships before, but that's usually done verbally by the captain or a senior officer over the announcement system. It's very rarely delivered to every single cabin on board in writing. I assumed that the reason for this was nothing serious, and it was probably just because MSC cruises speak lots of different languages on board their ships. I thought they were probably just issuing letters to cabins to make sure that everybody heard what was going on in their own language. On an MSC cruise, you'll find so many different nationalities on board. It's one of the things I really enjoy about cruising with them. On a ship leaving somewhere like Southampton, you'll be more likely to find more British nationals. On a ship leaving somewhere like Miami or Galveston in Texas, you'll be more likely to find American nationals. But the ship I was on had been operating on a loop, covering countries like France, Italy, and Spain, and therefore there were lots of different nationalities and lots of different languages being spoken on board. The letter said, "To make your trip as comfortable as possible, we would like to inform you that we are potentially expecting some challenging weather conditions during our navigation from Palermo to La Golette. Forecasts indicate that we may find rough seas across the western Mediterranean with high swells and wind gusts potentially exceeding 35 knots. This was totally fine. If anything, I really appreciated the heads up. The letter went on. Rest assured that MSC Splendida has been designed, built and equipped to safely navigate rough sea conditions such as these. We have carefully planned a navigational route that avoids the worst of the weather system and have made technical adjustments to ensure your journey remains as comfortable as possible. We currently do not expect this situation to affect our itinerary. We will promptly inform you if this changes." After reading this letter, I had a pretty strong gut feeling that we wouldn't be visiting Tunisia tomorrow, but again, I kept everything crossed and hoped for the best. I really appreciated the fact that MSC sent this letter to all of the cabins, because what it did was it removed the ability for the rumour mill to begin spinning on board. Cruise ships can be quite challenging places when the rumour mill starts, because suddenly you've got thousands of passengers in a relatively confined space, all thinking about what might happen or what someone has said is going to happen. So issuing this to everyone in writing just made sure that everyone received exactly the same message. Our first evening on board was totally fine throughout dinner service. It didn't feel any different to any other cruise, and the conditions outside felt completely normal. In fact, you could hardly feel the ship moving. The show went ahead as expected after dinner. The captain and the senior officers made an appearance in the theatre, as expected, and everything was going completely to plan. It wasn't until about 10 PM that night that the weather started to pick up, and it was clear that we were now beginning to experience the much rougher conditions that the cruise line had warned us about before. One of the easiest places to see the impact that the rough weather is having on the cruise ship is the onboard swimming pool. MSC Splendida has 3 main pools, one inside the ship with a retractable roof over it, one outside like on a typical cruise ship pool deck, and one at the very back or aft of the ship. During rough seas, the water in cruise ship swimming pools can and will move around. It'll usually come out the top of the pool, but it won't actually cause any issues because most of the pools at sea have what I'd call a splash zone or a splash area around them. This is a section of the pool that essentially allows water to flow freely around the pool and then drop back in to the pool itself. This splash zone, as I'm calling it, is very useful in rough seas, but it's also very useful when the weather's good because it allows people to relax and sit on the side with, for example, a drink in hand and dip their toes in the water without having to get wet by going in the actual swimming pool. In the rougher weather, swimming pools on cruise ships are usually emptied for a number of reasons. One of the most important reasons is the overall stability of the ship. Think about it. All of this water sloshing around at the very top of a ship could impact the overall stability of it. So if you're going to be able to minimise that, then you're probably going to by emptying it. Now, to be clear, this water moving around probably isn't going to cause a serious incident if it's not drained, but the passenger experience will often be better if the pools are emptied, or at least if the water level is reduced. This explains why sometimes you'll find cruise ship swimming pools only half filled with water during rough weather. It's worth mentioning that just because a swimming pool on a cruise ship is empty, it doesn't mean that you're going to experience rough seas. So if you're watching this video, don't worry, when you board your next cruise and there's no water in the pool, it doesn't mean that at all. All through a cruise, the crew will frequently empty the swimming pools in order to give them a really good clean. You'll find that this is most likely to take place at night, when the pool would be closed anyway. If you're wandering around the top decks late at night, you'll very often see the crew cleaning the decks and cleaning the pools. So again, don't worry if on your next cruise, that pool's not got any water in it. While we're talking about swimming pools, can we quickly address the point of the nets that suspend over the pool? Whenever I post videos of a cruise ship swimming pool online, I get so many comments about these nets. Some people talk about the fact the nets aren't doing a very good job of keeping the water in the pool, while others seem to think it's an amazing idea for a hammock from a cruise line. These nets that hang over the swimming pool, they're not designed to be a hammock, and they're also not designed to keep the water in, so don't worry that they're not doing the best of jobs. These nets signal to passengers that the pool is closed, and they will prevent passengers from entering the pool, whether it's full of water or, even worse, if it's empty. To be completely honest, the onboard experience wasn't really any different to what I've seen on other MSC cruises that I've taken in the past, which was absolutely brilliant. The ship seemed to handle the conditions so well. It was when I went to bed that I realised I made a serious mistake when booking this cruise. When you book a cruise, you can either book a guaranteed cabin, or you can pay a little extra to choose exactly where you would like your cabin to be located. I chose to save the money, as I often do, by allowing the cruise line to allocate my cabin to me based on what was left closer to the sailing date. That ended up with me getting a balcony cabin all the way at the very front of the ship. And if you think about the way that a cruise ship moves through the water, the front of the ship will rise and fall, so you're far more likely to feel motion. Now, I genuinely think that the way the sea was behaving that night, you would have felt the motion even if you were in a midship cabin. However, I certainly felt it a lot more, all the way at the very front of the ship. The next morning, we woke up to an announcement from the captain. They told us, "I regret to inform you, the weather conditions have not allowed us to enter port this morning. The prevailing strong winds and large swells could impact our ability to safely manoeuvre in and out of the port. In the interest of your safety and well-being, we have no option but to cancel today's call at La Galette." To be honest, I did see this one coming, because when I woke up in the morning, the wind that I'd heard all through the night hadn't calmed down at all, and I would have been really quite surprised if a ship the size of MSC Splendida would have actually been able to get into a port during that. When a cruise line cancels a cruise port, you'll usually then receive a full refund for any excursions that you've booked directly with the cruise line. This one's important because if you've booked an excursion or a tour with a third-party operator, they sometimes won't offer you a refund in that scenario. That's why it's really important before you book with a third party, because it can be a lot cheaper to do that you just make sure you're covered for the eventualities of a cruise. Because if you'd paid several €100s to go on a tour that day with a third party, this cancellation would really hurt. Since returning home, I've also submitted a claim to my travel insurance company, who should pay out, and I should get some money back because of this missed port. When I started cruising, I had no idea that travel insurance companies would cover things like missed ports of call. I took a cruise a few years ago where I got several £100 back because we had quite a few missed ports, and from that point on, any time that I have a missed port, I file and I submit a claim. If my claim comes back positive from this cruise, I should receive £100 back into my account, which I would be delighted with, because then it would bring the cost of my cruise initially all the way down. While I was disappointed that our call to Tunisia got cancelled, I completely understood why. What always frustrates me in this scenario is how annoyed some other passengers can get with teams such as guest services. Always remember that cruise lines don't cancel ports of call just for fun. During the captain's announcement in the morning, we were informed that we would be spending today at sea, and that a new entertainment schedule would be created to make sure that everyone had lots to do on board. We were also told that we would be updated later that day with where, if anywhere, we were able to dock either that night or tomorrow at some point. We were then updated that we would be docking at Palma de Mallorca the following afternoon, which was great news for me because I absolutely love the city of Palma. But when the announcement went out, there was quite a lot of what sounded like sarcastic cheering on board. So I can only imagine that quite a lot of the Spanish cruisers were well acquainted with Mallorca already.
The road conditions have not allowed us to enter Billabong this morning. The strong winds and the large swells impacted our ability to safely maneuver in and out of the port. In the interest of your safety and well-being, we had no option but to answer to the school at La Vuelta. We are also pleased to share good news. Tomorrow, 9th January, we will be calling at the beautiful city of Palma de Mallorca from 12 to 8 p.m.
Throughout this sea day, the conditions remained pretty rough for most of the day, but they were a lot more calm than what we experienced through the night. All of the lower decks on the ship were now fully closed, which is fairly common practice when you're sailing in rougher seas or in areas of high wind. The top decks were still open, although, to be honest, there really weren't many people out there because it was windy. The onboard swimming pools had now been emptied, which always feels weird to see during the day on a cruise. Obviously, this meant that they were now closed to passengers, but I'm sure there were some people on board who were really wishing that they could have got in while that water was sloshing around last night. This sort of thing always puts so much more stress and pressure on the inside venues of the ship, because if nobody can use any of the top deck or outside spaces, they will all want to be spending time on the inside. I did worry that you would find nowhere to sit down, all of the venues would be packed out, but to be honest, it wasn't the case at all. Pretty much everywhere you went, you would be able to sit down no problem at all. We were told that the ship was sailing at full capacity, and either that wasn't true, or a lot of the passengers were spending time in their cabins, which would make sense because during rough seas, one of the best things to do is to go to bed and try and sleep it off. I didn't feel seasick at all during this cruise, which I was absolutely delighted about. When seasickness does hit me, it can really hit me to the point where I just need to go lie down and nap, and it's just not worth me trying to power through. I always travel with things like motion sickness tablets, and also I always try to have a green apple to hand because that is a bit of a home remedy that always seems to work because apparently green apples settle your stomach. You're also supposed to avoid eating greasy and fatty foods if you're feeling rough while you're at sea, but I didn't alter what I was eating during this cruise because I felt pretty much fine, and that was good news for me because I absolutely love the pizza on an MSC cruise, and that meant I could keep on eating it. On both the second and third nights of this cruise, the weather picked up again to what it was like on the first night, if not slightly more severe. When we woke up in Barcelona on the final morning, I couldn't believe my balcony doorway. It was absolutely caked in salt. This is something that I've never seen before, and that balcony door was closed the majority of the time. Yes, okay, I did open it from time to time to pop out to my balcony to have a look, and I can imagine that that's probably when all of this salt has blown in due to the strong winds that we mentioned, but I've never ever seen that before. There was so much of it on there. Although the conditions throughout this cruise were rough, I do have to say the MSC Cruises handled this perfectly. All of the passengers on board were kept up to date in their own language with what was going on and what was happening, and at no point did this ship feel as though it was really rolling. I've been on other ships in the past, specifically smaller ships, that have really felt as though they're rolling out at sea, but not this one. She felt really quite stable and totally under control. I've been contacted by lots of people since posting my now viral video of this stormy weather, with multiple agencies wanting to build a story about this situation. The honest answer is that everything was under complete control, and at no point did anything at all on board feel unsafe, scary, anything like that. It was totally clear that MSC Cruises are used to dealing with adverse weather, and they really did everything that they could to help passengers feel as comfortable as possible. I really hope you've enjoyed hearing more about what it's like to spend time on a cruise ship during rough seas. If you're watching this video, you're maybe concerned about feeling motion sick or seasick on a future cruise. And if so, I'd like to invite you to come and join me over in this video next. Here, I share with you some of the top ways to prevent and also to cure the feeling of seasickness. Thank you so much for watching. Remember to hit that subscribe button and I'll hopefully see you over in this video next.